And President Eisenhower made a big mistake because he preferred to play golf not to meet with Fidel Castro, and he asked Vice President Nixon to meet with him, and Vice President was enough rude, and he pushed him directly toward the Soviet Union. Because after that, the Castro understood that he not welcomed in the United States. A big mistake, I think. And after that, it was the natural behavior of the Cold War. If we have somebody who disliked by our enemy, we have helped them, and we supported Fidel with all these weapons, but we didn't want to risk our life for Cuba. And they became heroes in the Soviet Union. All the people look at them as the heroes because they want this fighting against the Halaya, these great Americans. They fought for their freedom. And before, nobody knew about Cuba. But now they became very popular. And I remember there was a young guy, I asked my father, why not invite him to the Warsaw Pact to protect them against Americans? He told, why we have risked our life after the Second World War, confronting Americans for the Cuba. We don't know him, we don't know what their goals. They're too close to the American territory. We have to stay a little bit aside. And it was until Bay of Pigs, which I talk answering this question, I will not repeat, when Fidel Castro officially declared that he joined Soviet bloc. It was the obligation and burden of the Soviet Union to protect them. And only one way, as my father decided, they say, to do it, to send missiles to Cuba. And the Soviet leadership supported him. Only Mikoyan, his deputy, his friend, told Nikita, I think it is maybe too dangerous. And my father answering him, Anastas, I will think it is maybe even aventuristic, but what else can we do? We have to step back? No, we'll lose our face. We have to do it. And here is the problem of the Cold War. You have to manage this crisis, one after another, to avoid the war, but not to step back. It was beginning of all these things. And now I'm repeating, I'm saying about the balance of power, because after Khrushchev, we started to count this in a very different way, arithmetically. You have 100 warheads, I have 1,000, so I'm much stronger, I can kill you many times. By the way, it was one of these conversations with President Kennedy in Vienna. He told Khrushchev, we can kill you many times. Khrushchev, at that time, 6 warheads had reached American territory. He told, we can kill you only once. It's enough for us. And it was understanding of the balance of power. It's very different from military, because they understood that they live in the new world, when their military still live in the old world, where they can use these weapons. They cannot use these weapons. And here it was very important what happened after this, because they sent missiles to Cuba secretly. Many discussion why Khrushchev didn't announce it and make it secretly. I think you understand, the reasonable people. I announcing in July I will send missiles to Cuba. In 2 days you declare the blockade of Cuba. And next 2 weeks, invasion in Cuba, with no weapons, no protection, you can do everything you do. You send them secretly. But Khrushchev didn't understand one important thing, because he lived in the European environment, the European mentality of the people who have enemies at the gate all their history. In 1240s, next century. So when Americans replaced Germans on our borders, it was a problem for the government, it was a problem for the military, it was no problem for the people. Americans were very lucky, you know, lived all their history protected by two oceans. No enemies of the gate, no war on their territory. That made them very vulnerable to this psychologically. Because I think compare United States like a tiger that grew up in the zoo, and then you send them to the jungle. Everything expected, everything threatening. So the Cuban Missile Crisis was mostly American psychological crisis. Crisis of the nation that found that we are vulnerable, we can be killed. And it is made these people eager just to take these missiles out for any expenses, even risking the nuclear war. And you cannot use any logical argument why Soviet Union will launch their missiles from Cuba and not launch them from mainland. Only 30 minutes since the delivery. It is a problem of psychological crisis. You cannot talk about this. It made for the President Kennedy very complicated to resolve this crisis, how we can do it. By the way, it was the same psychological crisis in 9/11, but I will not discuss about the things. So, the beginning of the discussion. Of course, my father, being in the war, Second World War, understood that it can be discovered anytime. It was discovered late as possible. Still not everything was on the island, but most of the things. And then he expected what will be the reaction. I remember this. On the 22nd, it was evening, about 9 o'clock in the evening, and after the dinner we have our usual walk. I lived together with him, and then they asked him that he had a call, and he went in the building and come back and told, you know, the President of the United States will speak for the nation. There's nothing else would happen. They discovered missiles. I asked Soviet leadership, the President Central Committee, to go to Kremlin, Defense Minister, other people will wait, what will they will say. It is 8 hours difference, so the speech will be at 3 o'clock in the morning. 1 hour before, the Americans gave this text of speech to the Soviet ambassador, and he dictated it by telephone to my father, Ambassador Troyanovsky, and it was the relief, because it was possibility of the announcing invasion, that majority of the all EXCOM advised, all military thought, let's whip them out, let's show them how strong we are, because they didn't know about technical nuclear weapons, they didn't know about all this Soviet military there, they were blind, but they blind person touching them, but they don't know what they're doing. And my father knew this, and he was very scared, because he told, if we will allow the first shot, then it will be different logic of the war, and it will be the real big war. So the quarantine diplomatic language was invitation to the discussion, to negotiation, to bargaining. And this bargaining was very important, because now we say that we have to negotiate with friends. It's very wrong. With friends you not negotiate, with friends you have a party. You negotiate with enemies, because with enemies you can explain your position, understand their position, and pushing back and forth, find something in the middle that you have to resolve any of these crises. Of course, if you don't want to provoke the war. It was this invitation. President Kennedy very balancedly said, I will not permit any ships carrying nuclear military equipment and weapons to go through the blockade. And Khrushchev told, no, we not accepted quarantine because it's violated freedom of navigation on the ocean. And same moment he gave the order to stop these ships. We know in 13 days this dramatic picture, 2 Soviet ships, their submarine approaching the quarantine line, submarine between them, the American destroyer, just from other side, 2 miles there, all of them in tension. I wrote this in my book too.